I have the pleasure, jointly with Jeff, to basically extend and expand the keynote from Pete, and a bit recap generally what we are doing, and a bit go into, most importantly, where are we going, right? This is what Pete showed, right? In the 4 major challenges we are really indexing on. I wanted to give you a bit more context, right? And we are going into a very workload-centric world, right? And one of the key things which is driving our thinking and driving where we are going with generally Rancher on our platform is, for example, that we see a massive growth in AI, right? And this means a couple of things for us, and you will see this in our portfolio. For example, that RK2 is an officially supported distribution from NVIDIA for their GPUs, right? So GPU enablement is for us really important. The other aspect of it is that just the number of infrastructure is just exploding, right? It's really driving the growth, right? And I put something interesting in, right? Because people wonder what DeepSeek might mean, right? The interesting thing about DeepSeek is that it makes AI consumption so much cheaper, right? If you look how much it basically is costing in terms of operation, it's crazy cheap, right? And the interesting thing is there's something which is called rebound effect or Jevons paradox, right? That basically with this kind of new AI models, we're gonna see even a bigger explosion. Because now having AI models running gets even cheaper, right? More accessible. The other key trend is that hardware and software is really disaggregated. And this is what Pete has under the theme, computers everywhere. But fundamentally what it means is Kubernetes is everywhere, right? And for example, on the left side, you see an infotainment system in an airplane. And meanwhile, this is not from us, right? We had last year at SUSECon on stage, Viasat, and they are running K3S clusters on airplanes, for example, to really power the Wi-Fi, right? And this, you're gonna see as well the effects of this in our portfolio, right? For example, we extended the life cycle of K3S and RK2 up to 5 years, especially to support use cases where Kubernetes goes into trains, into devices, where the life cycle of the hardware is much longer and therefore as well the life cycles of the software. And this brings us basically to the key pattern, right? And this is what we call distributed cloud, right? And a couple of years ago, people, for example, moved a lot of workloads, everything into one of the hyperscalers, right? Today, the reality is you do all of it. And you optimize the workload for the right infrastructure, right? You have, for example, a workload which is a data batch job. Perfect. Public cloud, right? Hyperscaler. You have all the elasticity. You bring it up once per month. You do the job. You bring it down, right? You have something very latency sensitive, right? Which, for example, a trading platform. You need to run this in close to the stock exchanges, right? You run this on-prem, directly on bare metal to really optimize against the latency. And this is a bit then where we see really the thing evolving, right? And therefore as well the challenges for our customers and users, right? Because the challenge is that those platform teams, they need to abstract all this complexity away, right? And because they are their customers, their stakeholders, application developers, application operators, they don't care, right? They want just to deploy the workloads across this distributed infrastructure. And last but not least, cyber resiliency has become really top of mind across almost all big global areas, right? North America, this is an example in the European Union. We're gonna go a bit deeper in the rest of the presentation, right? But this is one of the reasons, for example, we are investing so heavily in application collection, because trusted supply chain is really becoming top of mind. One last thing to share is that meanwhile we think that Kubernetes is already quite mainstream, we are still, when we are looking really just at the adoption of our open source projects, right, we are still having kind of a really heavy growth, right? Just in K3S, I think we had last year growth over 60% year on year. Harvester, 68% year on year, right? So we are still seeing exponential growth when it comes to cloud native. And putting this into kind of an abstract analogy is a bit where we are coming from is, this is basically the old VMware world, right? Which is cool, but containers are much better, right? And who could imagine globalization without containers? Nobody, right? But if we stay in this, right, and this is the runtime, the Kubernetes engine, and the containers are, of course, they are the containers, right? The ship is basically useless without all the supporting infrastructure around it, right? You need basically the whole platform around it to make the ship really useful. And this is then where we are coming from, right? So we evolved from just having Rancher to a much more complete platform to really help you with getting the best out of the container technology. And you all know Linux. I will quickly translate. So Harvester is now SUSE virtualization. If you still know our old product names, Kubernetes engines, it's K3S and RK2. Rancher Manager has not changed. Observability, the original name was Stack State. Security, we mean New Vector. Storage, we mean Longhorn. And application collection is application collection. And basically, what we are doing as a bigger theme is we start to develop optimized and specialized tailored versions of this platform to accommodate better certain workloads, right? We have this for AI, we have this for Edge, we have this for SAP, we have this for Temenos, and we're looking for more. In a nutshell, what we do or what we see as our core mission is helping you and basically the platform teams to build this abstracted layer so that you can basically provide kind of a self-service experience, because this is what your customers want. Your developers, they want kind of a self-service experience because it gives them autonomy, it gets them quickly from development to production. And the key point is here across this challenge where you have distributed infrastructure, right? Because you optimize your workloads or your applications against the infrastructure where they should really run. When we are coming then to our core tenets, right? We have 5 core value tenets. And it starts basically with the platform layer, which abstracts away all this complex infrastructure that you have from on-prem data and public cloud, whatever you're using. We make it secure, we make it observable. And of course, right, we invested this year heavily into build, helping you to build with application collection and validated designs for developers. And finally, of course, an important part of all of this is in terms of value that we want to help you modernize. And this then becomes very apparent when we speak more about SUSE virtualization. So one thing we want quickly to touch on is lifecycle. And lifecycle, why is it important? We touched on it, right? If you put, for example, K3S or RK2 onto a train or something, right? You might not be able to update the cluster so periodically, right? So you want a very long life cycle. And this is why we offer up to 5 years. The same we see for many of our customers, right? The platform teams, often it's not even the platform, right? The platform, they can go often at high velocity. They can afford to update every 4 months, right? But often the workloads run on top of it. They cannot deal with the breaking changes that come from one version to another. So, and Kubernetes has still a very aggressive life cycle. It's 14 months and it's end of life. We offer by default 18 months. And we give you an option for the whole platform to go up to 24 months, right? Which gives you 2 years, right? Which gives you plenty of time to have a planned and predictable upgrade cycles that you do once per year or maybe a bit more often if you need to. If you have questions, just interrupt me. Quickly to touch on, right? We have Rancher now for SAP. And the key aspect really on the Rancher for SAP is that it comes with what we call integrated support, right? So you don't need to call for one problem SUSE and for another problem SAP. You always call SAP and they help you with L1 to L3 support, right? And of course, we are connected directly with them and help them in the back end to deal with any problem. The interesting bit is, to just keep a bit touching on it, that it really fits as well into this hybrid story, right? So SAP, they have as well a cloud platform, which they call RISE, right? But still customers, they have a lot of workloads they want to run on-prem, right? They can now do, they can stack and basically still hardware on-prem and can it run with SUSE Rancher for SAP, and they call this edge integration cell, and use at the same time for other workloads on SAP, the cloud, right? So again, optimize the workload against the right infrastructure. The other thing is, very similar, we work closely with Temenos, and they are kind of an SAP for the banking sector. Security, I think this was the announcement. I don't want to touch too much on it, right? But we are now much nicer integrated with Microsoft Sentinel. I wanted to give you a bit an outlook where we are going. And we are developing what we call SUSE Security Hub. And the idea is that we really seamlessly integrate the capabilities that we have from our security products like New Vector and blend it with the rest of our portfolio, right? And now you wonder why does this matter? It matters because with basically developers becoming or other stakeholders becoming more autonomy on the platform, security is shifting fundamentally a bit left. And what you really want is to provide in every moment the right context. So as, for example, an platform operator or an application operator, you get as quickly as possible from A to B. And I'm going to show you in a couple of seconds how we envision this, how this will work, and you get the sense. The other aspects, of course, we're going to continue to invest into self-learning security, right? Which is basically that the security product itself, it learns what normal behavior is, and if it sees basically deviation from it, it can do remediation steps. And this will continue to be enhanced, especially as well with AI capabilities. The last aspect, of course, compliance is important, and we're going to help you with this. But to give you a bit more idea how we envision context is that the deep integration of the SUSE Security Hub will work that you, wherever you are in our product, and right now you see, for example, Rancher, we surface security critical information. For example, this is Rancher Manager, you're looking at a deployment of a specific workload, and we give you in-context information. And those links are directly deep links and take you exactly where you need to go, right? And here, for example, then you see a direct link which would take you directly deeply into SUSE security. Oh, I think one screen is missing. And we have basically, this is already, I think, we have basically then the same for our observability product itself, right? So basically, wherever you are in our portfolio, you always get the right information at the right time. Our observability product, how many of you use SUSE observability? So, but I think the key reason as a takeaway is why we brought it in, right? And this is, again, it's because we are talking really about a whole platform, right? And we have many different stakeholders which have very different needs when they come to use our observability product. From basically the product owner to the dev team and the platform team. And what we are seeing often is that the developers have a problem and they call up the platform team and say, we have a problem, we don't know what it is, can you help us, right? Because they themselves have very little actionable insights. And if we really think about what is needed to get to actionable insights, it's actually quite a lot, right? Because with raw telemetry data, most people cannot do a lot, right? You need extreme knowledge to actually make something actionable out of it. So what we do is we take the raw telemetry data, we create a topology, we correlate it, and I think the key aspect is that we help them with APM, with per application performance metrics, to get a better issue recognition. But even this is not the greatest thing. What we show you, and did somebody already had a demo of SUSE observability? Okay, you had, so I think I have internet, so we can directly show it. So this is our playground. You can just go and play around with it. And I mean, the core aspect is here we are running, for example, SockShop, right? And you can see all the microservices, and you see we have several ones who are in a critical state. We can render as well a topology, which gives you a good picture of what's really going on. And we have below a timeline feature where you can go forth and back in time. But what I wanted really to point out is if I go, for example, here in one of my services which has a critical problem, right? For example, here the monitor is telling me my HTTP time is really bad, and I dive in, I get directly a remediation guide, right? And the remediation guide makes this very actionable, right? So it takes basically this raw telemetry data into something that your stakeholders can really work with. It's basically three strategic things. One is seamless integration. And when we say seamless integration, we mean seamless integration into Rancher, but as well seamless integration, for example, into security, right? That we augment our observability lens with security relevant information, and again, get you very quickly from A to B. Automation and simplification, big topic, right? So I think where we are really going is taking those insights and then look what we can do, for example, with AI to remediate stuff for you directly, right? So that many problems you don't even need even to take care yourself. And finally, we are working on combining our application performance metrics with our infrastructure metrics and go into the space of cost optimization, right? And our AI team gave, if you have seen Demo Palooza today and the AI keynote, where we are going, right? So that you get a good sense of it, what you are spending and how to better control cost. Those were the building blocks, security and observability. And the next chapter we are really opening is how we can get developers quicker from development into production, right? And there, what we touched in the beginning on, trusted supply chain is becoming really important thing, right? And my colleague FX, he compares it basically to the mad software disease, right? So basically, if you remember the mad cow incidents we had, like, when was it, 20 years ago? As well, traceability became key, right? We really wanted to understand where a specific cow was coming from, right? Or where the meat we are eating, we needed really to trace it back to a specific animal. And here you can see different actions that, as two key examples, the North American side took, and specific actions that the European Union took, right? And this is currently going into national law in the European Union, right? And this will really change how serious most companies will need to take cyber resiliency. This is a chart on how the growth of supply chain attacks grew. I would take it with a grain of salt, right? Because probably we never really looked before 2020 for supply chain attacks, but they were all the time there, right? And this is why we have application collection, right? This is, yeah, let's maybe start with what it is, right? It's a curated set of applications. And let's take an example, right? Everybody needs, once you have deployed your Kubernetes cluster, it's not done, right? You need more components. And let's take, for example, a popular API gateway, right? Apache RP6, and you just download the upstream version. And there's nothing wrong with this, right? But as you can see, it comes with 4 containers, a couple of sub-Helm charts, right? And the fundamental thing is it's built actually on 3 different OSs, the containers. The interesting thing is that just by using this upstream version, you are pulling into your system 396 CVEs. What we do is, right, with application collection is we create the build from the ground up. And we have that kind of a lot of experience because we do this for over 25 years in the Linux business, right? We create basically an always up-to-date Linux kernel and versions through our build service with thousands of packages so that you have a clean operating system. And what we do as well, we build all the Helm charts, everything from ground up, right? So everything is coming from one trusted source. And the critical difference you can see is we ship this near 0 CVEs. So instead of having 396, you get basically 0 critical and only 11 overall. How many applications do we have? We have over 70 applications. And it's, yeah, the other metrics looks as well good. So we see a massive adoption and a lot of platform pulls. So it's one of the most popular new capabilities that we brought into Rancher. And that's it, yeah. As well, quickly, if you want to see it, we can as well do that. We have apps.rancher.io. If you're already a Rancher Prime customer, this is something you have already today. You see here our catalog. Here we have our applications. And now if you're wondering what happens if upstream, look, we already have 72 applications. If upstream does, for example, they publish a patch or something, right? What we're doing is we are all the time observing what happens upstream, and it triggers our build process. And what you then get is basically, you can see in some busy days, we do over 1,000 builds in a single day of open source software. So going back, what problem we are really solving for you is that you need to consider supply chain, right? It's not done by just using open source, right? Of course, we as SUSE, we believe open source is inherently much better suited for security as closed source because it's transparent, you can apply scrutiny. But you need as well to consider, of course, where you are getting it from. Next topic is validated designs. And what we did is we had always a lot of tools in this space, right? We have Rancher Desktop, which is a local runtime for Kubernetes for the real only alternative to Docker Desktop. We have Fleet as a GitOps tool. We have application collection, which actually can give you really good building blocks. What we did is we put out blueprints, like this one, for example, and it gives you basically a validated design that we as well test to make sure it actually works, that can give you a developer workflow with leveraging the tools we already have, plus your possible tools or tools that we recommend. And you can basically leverage this for an opinionated workflow for your developers, right? The beauty of it is you can as well use something different, right, if you want. And Jeff, if I understood correctly, this is one of many we want to publish, right? So if you have feedback, please reach out to us. Two more things we did in the build space is, and I think we showed this a bit at Demopalooza today, is one, is now we have a private registry which is fully supported by SUSE, available for Rancher. If you are, for example, a Suite customer, this is already completely included. And the other thing we added is virtual clusters, which you have seen already today in the keynote live. And we're going to spend a bit more time on that. What it gives you is, so developers, they all want basically their own cluster, right? Because it gives them a lot of autonomy. But what the problem of this, it comes with quite a high cost, right? Because you need, for example, for availability, more than one control plane, right? And you have enormous costs on the infrastructure side. The other aspects is with a cluster per tenant per team is that most teams, if you ask them how much infrastructure they need, they're gonna say you a big number, and they tend to totally oversubscribe, and they never use the whole resources actually that they ask for. So virtual clusters is kind of giving you a bit of both worlds, the best, right? So meanwhile, everybody gets their own Kubernetes API, and it feels like they're having their own cluster. The workloads, they are still shared on the same host cluster. So you get the efficiency from running basically the same cluster, and at the same time, you get the user experience of having a cluster on your own. The other key aspect or the other key use case we are actually seeing is that this is getting quite popular, bringing us back to the initial theme with GPUs, right? We have many users who already run GPUs. And if you're, for example, working directly with hardware accelerators, you don't want often a virtualization layer in between, because it's getting much harder to really access the hardware accelerators. So virtual clusters can give you then kind of a multi-tenancy model. For use cases, for example, wherever you run on bare metal without any virtualization layer in between. The interesting bit is then, with this, we are now on a spectrum of multi-tenancy options. So you have the very soft multi-tenancy, which is just a namespace, right? Which is the Kubernetes tenancy model, which is extremely efficient, but is as well, when it comes to autonomy, it's quite limiting. You have what we call K3K, which is basically our own virtual cluster project, and it's done actually by the same team that does as well K3S. So we have a lot of expertise in the sector, which gives you kind of this intermediate kind of multi-tenancy. And really, if you really want hard multi-tenancy, we have SUSE virtualization, right? So when you think about this, what you will need to make to balance and make your decision and your trade-offs is autonomy, and how much autonomy you want to give and how much isolation you need, right? The more isolation you need, the harder you will tend to do kind of a hard multi-tenancy model with VMs, and the less isolation you need, the more you can go actually to the left-hand side. Finally, let's touch as well a bit, talk about modernization. Our modernization product is SUSE virtualization, which is the open source version. It's Harvester, right? This is just a slide to remind yourself what Harvester is about, and it's basically KVM under the cover. And what I want to highlight maybe is the two use cases where SUSE virtualization is really great as a takeaway for you. One is your workloads are already containerized, but you're running on a virtualized platform. And often this virtualized platform is VMware, right? The reason why it's VMware is when they introduced Kubernetes, there was already VMware, right? This is the main reason, right? And then the Kubernetes team asked for infrastructure, and they said, yo, here are your VMs, and they started running with this. The interesting bit is that essentially your workloads are already containerized. You don't even need to modernize them. You just need to take them over to the new cluster. And going to a solution like SUSE virtualization or Harvester, you reduce a lot of complexity because it plays really well with Rancher, and it's much more lightweight. The other nice use case is the modernization use case, right? So you start to you modernize workloads, right? Or you create new services, and you still, for example, have this single old backend service, which is still a VM, right? And it's quite costly to migrate it to something like a container. You can just bring it over and run in the same cluster containers next to virtual machines. When it comes to announcements, the big thing that we did is we now allow you to use all kind of external storages, right? Because this was one of the biggest customer asks, right? As well, very similar to any other thing we discussed today, to infrastructure. You optimize your infrastructure for workloads, and you optimize your infrastructure for the special circumstances it needs to cater for, right? And this is why, for many reasons, for example, you're using Dell storage, or using Oracle storage, or you're using storage from NetApp, right? So now we are in the certification process of the 4 you see on the screen. so that you have many options and can cater to the best one. This is a bit the key initiatives for SUSE virtualization for this year, right? So external storage, we talked about it. We're going to invest more into networking. We're going to invest more into upgrades. We're going to invest more into migrating VMs. And we're going to work more on the Rancher integration. Finally, but yeah, the last topic is that, as you know, we are expanding our SaaS portfolio. But let's maybe speak a bit more about what's in for you, right? And what's in for you is that we see over and over that you, for example, you don't want to run certain services yourself. For example, let's take observability, right? Observability, it comes with a huge database, right? Growing over time. It's actually quite a challenge to keep a service like this alive, right? So what we're doing is we want to give you the flexibility that you can choose if you want, for example, observability or Rancher Manager. You want that we take over the operation for you and take care of it, and you just consume it, or you can still run it yourself, right? And give you there more flexibility for all kind of use cases. The first three we are offering as a service is cloud observability, application collection, and Rancher itself. And this is basically already where we end, and we can have Q&A.